Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anthony Alaka with Dory Hills Capital, and I want to welcome you to the Endeavour Silver podcast for September 29th, 2021. I hope everyone's doing well under the circumstances, and I want to thank you for taking the time today to join our virtual lunch. Almost all of you are familiar with Endeavour Silver. We presented the company about 5 months ago, but there have been some key developments since then, and we're happy to have them on again to give us an update on some recent milestones. We feel that Endeavour Silver is well positioned to benefit from the positive outlook for the industrial demand for silver. Move to renewable energy suggests that silver prices will not only improve but remain strong for the foreseeable future. Just to refresh your memory, Endeavour Silver is a mid-tier precious metals company with high-grade underground silver gold mines in Mexico. The company is also advancing its Terronera project, which will be the company's flagship mine at some point. And Endeavour Silver also has a portfolio of several other exploration and development projects in Mexico, Chile, and now the US. Company trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker EXK. It's currently trading at $4 per share, representing a market cap of only $685 million. Company has a very strong balance sheet with $150 million in working capital and an accomplished management team that we've known for a while, and they have a proven track record for delivering results. And with the recent pullback in the price of silver that Dan and I were just talking about, I do feel that this is an excellent opportunity for those who believe in the long-term prospects for silver. With us today to discuss Endeavour Silver's operations and growth strategy going forward is the company's CEO, Dan Dickson. Dan, welcome. Great to have you back again.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and thanks for taking the time to give our viewers an update on the company. It's obvious a lot of exciting things are happening with the company, and I'm excited for you to share those with the group. Before I turn it over to you, I just want to say if anyone has a question during the presentation, simply type it into the Q&A box and we'll make sure that it gets answered. So with that said, Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate everyone's time. Like Anthony, I'm glad you welcomed everybody to the webinar for today being the 29th, which we've seen almost $1 drop in silver price. So sometimes it's all about timing, and today's a different day coming into quarter end. I would imagine it's a lot of the producers selling into month end and quarter end and getting some sales out. We'll end up holding some silver here at the end of the quarter in a market like this, and you're always going to have corrections. Nothing's linear upwards. It's the ebbs and flows, and we know that silver is one of the most volatile silver metals, and today we're experiencing that. So without further ado, our cautionary note, everybody will be cautioned. I will be making some forward-looking statements today. Duly note that things in the future can change. I know Anthony touched on, we have a lot of people participating today in today's luncheon, and a lot of you maybe have a history of a knowledge of Endeavour and what we do. And I think the last time we gave a presentation to this group was about 6 months ago. And lots changed in that 6 months. First off, Brad Cook went from CEO to the executive chairman role, and I've moved up from the chief financial officer role to the CEO role as of May of 2021. And I'd say the last 5-6 months have been focused on a lot of internal pushes for internal programs with regards to our culture and what we want to achieve internally over the next 3 to 5 years. Starting to look more outwardly, getting involved with a lot of our stakeholders. And then about 3 weeks ago, we put out a feasibility study on our Terronera project, which again, Anthony touched on, will become our flagship asset hopefully in 2 years. So we are a mid-tier producer. We are fully in Mexico from an operations standpoint. We do have projects down in Chile and in Nevada now. Our two operating assets at this point is Guanaceví. We've been there 15 years. Bolañitos, we've been there 14 years. This year we also had the Compass asset that we actually closed in August just because of the scale and from a cost profile. So lots have changed in the last 6 months. Obviously continue to look to optimize our operations. We feel we have one of the best organic growth profiles in the space. Continue to make new discoveries, always looking to acquire, improve, add our expertise and add value to projects. and ultimately maintain that silver leverage. We are one of the best silver leverage in the space. Ultimately, you've seen a lot of silver companies go out and buy gold assets. It's a function of what we see from our multiples in silver and the scarcity in silver and what's available out there, and acquiring some cash flow. And we did pick up a gold asset in the last 3 months, but for us, our goal is to maintain that silver and be a primary silver producer. Just quick recap. There we are in Mexico. Again, all our operations in Mexico. We have a Mexican head office in Leon, which is basically right in the middle of Mexico, close to our Bolañitos operation. And ultimately, Leon is about an 8-hour drive to Terronera, which is on the west coast of Mexico in the state of Jalisco, about an hour inland from Puerto Vallarta. Phenomenal jurisdiction. Mexico's had a long history of mining. We're still, even with what's happened in Mexico over the last 3 years with the new regime in place from a government standpoint, still remains one of the more attractive jurisdictions in the world from a mining perspective. We do spend a little bit of time on our sustainability and ESG, and I think Endeavour was built with the idea that you always need a social license to operate in the communities that we do. Guanaceví is right beside a community. Bolañitos is adjacent to a community. We would never be able to operate in those communities over the last 15 years if it wasn't for some of the programs that we've put in place to make sure we're good corporate citizens. And we always talk about Endeavour operating with corporate integrity and what that means. And ultimately, it just means being a good neighbor. And as I say, we've touched on in the last 6 months working on a safety culture and behavioral programs inside the company, one that we call Tequido, and ultimately means I care for you and we want you to care for me, and have courage to kind of act and courage to care. And it's all works together from a safety standpoint, a planet standpoint, and ultimately in our bottom line. Focusing on human resource and people are going to become very important in our industry again. From 2008 to 2012, saw significant increases in wages and salaries amongst the professionals. I think we're going to see that again. We are still in an uptick despite what we're seeing in the last 3-4 weeks. Yeah, these corrections are that normal pullback in times like this. And I think once we start to run again, retention and attracting employees is going to be vital to the success of Endeavour going forward. Some recent highlights. Anthony touched on it really over the last 6 months, but it's putting out our feasibility study for Terronera. And ultimately, what we talk about from Terronera is going to give us a flagship asset with a 12-year mine life that ultimately we haven't had at Guanaceví. We've been there at 15 years. We've been at Bolañitos for 14 years. Our reserve life at each one of those operations has really been no more than 2 years over that period of time. And of course, as an underground vein miner, you can always replace what you mine and drill out and replace those resources that you convert into reserves. And it's been successful for us, but at the same time, it limits the scope, and eventually those underground vein mines are going to run out. Now, we think we have a long horizon still at Guanaceví and at Bolañitos, but for us, Terronera will give us a 12-year mine life that we can point to the market and show. And the cost profile of Terronera is going to be phenomenal. So we put out a feasibility study September 7th that shows robust economics and something that we ultimately can build. And I'll get more into that later on in the presentation. We are continuing to starting some earthworks and early works on Terronera, but also continue to look past that and look to the future. And for us, we picked up a gold asset in Nevada, 300,000 ounces of gold, 13 million ounces of silver. There's a historical resource there, a historical PEA on it, which ultimately valued it at about $90 million using 1380 gold. We picked it up for $10 million. We think it was very opportunistic. The company that had held it ultimately had debt issues. They put a crypto token in place tied to the gold underground, got all that cleaned up, made the payments so they could cover all their debt and end up with a small company with about $1 million left into it. And like I say, I think we're being very opportunistic on it. We have an exploration plan that we're putting together now for 2022. Maybe it goes into 2023 and see if we can grow that asset and make it significant to our portfolio. Our H1 production, we're ahead of plan. We produced just under 4 million silver equivalent ounces. Obviously, in the next week and a half, we'll have Q3 results out from a production standpoint. And then in Q2, we did see an increase in our costs. And one of the things that we're going to work on here, or we've worked on in Q3 and expect to continue Q4, is making sure that we get our costs in line with our guidance and reduce that cost. And there's a number of factors that happen for Q2 that I'll get into when we talk about the mines. But ultimately, in the rising price environment, we always have to focus on costs and what we can do to ultimately contain that going forward. Here's just a quick slide of our outlook from 2021 compared to actuals. In January, we provide guidance typically for the upcoming year, which this year we guided 6.1 to 7.1 million silver equivalent ounces. We're on track to either exceed that guidance or hit the high end of it. We did just shy of 4 million ounces in H1 2021, so tracking really well. Where we have missed is on a cost standpoint. It's primarily operating costs. We guided 750 as the midpoint of our range, and we came in at 1050, so a significant increase. And there's a handful of reasons that happened in the first half. One, all our guidance was done at $22 silver and $17.50 gold. We'd beat that, but ultimately we significantly beat those prices in the first half. But we have significant royalty costs, special mining duty costs, which EBITDA profits paid to the Mexican government. We also did a lot of sill development in areas that we consider OPEX development, so operating cost development, heading to reserves or mineralized ore that we don't actually have reserves on. So under IFRS, we don't capitalize that. All that flows through. All these operating costs ended up in our all-in sustaining costs. The same thing. We're about $3 higher on a per ounce basis through the first half of the year on silver ounces. But again, expect that to come down here in Q3 and ultimately again drive that down in Q4. Things that we're seeing there longer term is inflation. We are starting to see some geological engineers, geologists, generally your professionals, those wages are starting to increase, and that's kind of across the industry. It's attracting talent, making sure that we can try to retain key individuals. And otherwise, the global supply constraints impacted some things, not anything in particular, just across the board. So it is there. We've got to do a good job going forward to try to get our costs down as best we can. And I think we're going to be able to show that here in the back half of the year. Sustaining capital was in line with budget. Development budget, we had a $9 million development budget basically till July. That was to advance Terronera, early works on Terronera, completing the feasibility study, and then an exploration program of $10 million for 2021. We're on track for that. Exploration is important to the company. We've been built by the drill bit over the years. Obviously, Guanaceví and Bolañitos have had discoveries over the last 15 years and 14 years respectively, and Terronera being an organic discovery for us. And we've got a phenomenal pipeline of exploration properties that we think will be ultimately, hopefully, our fourth or fifth operating assets when it's all said and done. Our financial strength at the end of Q2, we have over $125 million of cash. Working capital was north of $145 million. Anthony touched on that early on. We don't have any long-term debt. We have about $6 million of lease equipment on our books. So we are in very good position to leverage up our balance sheet if we can to construct Terronera. And I'll get into that a little bit more. In Q2, we completed the sale of El Cubo. It's an old operating asset for us near Bolañitos. Sold that for about $20 million in cash and share payments, with contingent payments going through. So Guanaceví, I'll touch on our mines relatively quickly and try to focus more on Terronera for everybody. Guanaceví for us has been our flagship asset, like I say, for 15 years. It's what we built the company off of. It's a fully built, fully permanent mine that was running out of ore and underexplored. We brought our expertise back in 2006, 2007, made discoveries, and subsequently made discoveries ever since. And in 2019, we made a new discovery we call El Curso. El Curso is located between an old mine that we mined out, Porvenir Cuatro, and then a new mine that we developed into in 2019 called Malache. El Curso, we had no upfront costs. So the concessions are held by another group. We've leased these concessions, but what we do have is significant royalties on it. And it's a sliding scale silver royalty. So as silver prices rise, that royalty increases. And anything over $25, we paid a 16% royalty. Anything between $20 and $25, we pay a 13% royalty. Ultimately, we had no upfront costs. We knew these ounces were here. We just had to drill it out and prove it out. And at $22 silver, this deposit's worth about $250 million. We're going to generate about 66% of that for ourselves and 33% for what I call as our partner, which is Frisco, owned by Carlos Slim in Mexico, one of the wealthiest men in the world. There are other concessions in the area. Obviously, some easy things here. You can see these wedges between our concessions and the El Curso claim. Some low-hanging fruit to continue to add resources and work with Frisco to continue to add claims to Guanaceví or concessions to the mine, which we see now gives us about 5, 6, 7, 8 more years of life at Guanaceví at some of the highest grades we've ever seen. El Curso's grades mirror what we had at Porvenir Cuatro, extremely high grade. We're running nearly 450 grams silver equivalent. But again, it is a higher cost, but with very higher margins because of that royalty. The Bolañitos mine, again, pretty mature. We've been there 14 years. We've continued to make some discoveries here, put out results on Bolañitos mid-year, about 3.5 months ago. We continue to drill around Bolañitos and continue to make discoveries. This has converted from basically a silver gold mine to now what I'd call a gold silver mine. 80% of the revenue here comes from gold, 20% comes from silver. Still continue to mine about 3 areas. One we call Lucero, another one San Miguel, and La Luz. We are drilling on an area called Belen. Hopefully expect to have that area Belen come on either in the back half of this year, here in Q4, or ultimately in Q1 of next year. Bolañitos, not as much kind of to touch on. It's been running pretty steady state since Q3 of 2020. Q2 2020, we were shut down because of COVID, but we've been running around 600,000 silver equivalent ounces per quarter. Q2 was 660, so pretty good quarter in the second quarter. Q3, we're expecting similar. Gold grades are running 2 grams, north of 2 grams per ton. Silver grades running 40 to 50 grams per ton. Our cost per ton in Q2 is a bit higher, about $78 per ton, where we generally run $70 per ton. But ultimately, this is a pretty mature asset. We know what we're going to get out of Bolañitos. It's historically been a very good cash cow, still producing cash flow to this day. But ultimately, it's about just extending life here. And we have about 4 to 5 years of life that we know of. But again, exploration potential to continue to push that out 6, 7, 8 years. So we've been at Bolañitos 14 years. Ultimately, we think we'll be there about 20 years. So that's what we do. These 2 mines will produce about 6 to 6.5 million silver equivalent ounces per year. But ultimately, what we have going forward now is Terronera. Those 2 slides I skipped were basically Compass that we've shut down. It was 5% of our production here in 2021. In 2020, it was 10% of our production. I'm sure I could get questions at the end of this presentation on it. We put it into production in 2019. It was 250 tons per day, not overly significant for the company. We didn't have the same exploration potential or exploration success that we had at Guanaceví and Bolañitos at Compass. And ultimately, we think there's alternatives there that will be better for us. The amount of time that we're spending on Compass, it just made more sense since it was negative free cash flow to shut it down and look at some strategic alternatives. But ultimately, it's Terronera. That's what everyone's talking about. What we're out telling our shareholders about, fielding phone calls from banks, investor groups all the time with Terronera, and it will become our flagship asset. And ultimately, it's going to double our production and cut our cost profile in half. So again, cash costs over the first half of the year was about $10.50. Terronera will cut that in half because cash costs on this project using $15.75 gold and $20 silver is 59 cents per ounce of silver on a net byproduct basis. All-in sustaining costs would effectively be about $3.24 over the 12-year mine life. So Again, not many projects are coming to market in the silver space that have the metrics that Terronera does. I think there's 2 or 3 that you can count over the last 3-4 years. And Terronera is effectively going to be one of the lowest cost mines in the silver space from an all-in sustaining cost and a cash cost standpoint. We purchased Terronera in 2010. Grupo de Mexico, it had sat in their portfolio since 1934 to 2010 when we got our hands on it. They had 5 drill holes on that project over that period of time. So almost 80 years. We put in about 5 drill holes probably in the first 6 months. And we've invested over $30 million, completing various technical reports, economic studies, drilling over 100,000 meters on it. And we've defined two ore bodies in the Terronera vein and one in the La Luz vein, a much smaller vein. It's really gold structure. But ultimately, there's a number of veins on our concessions that we hold over. We hold over 25,000 hectares in the area and currently have over 7.5 million tons in reserves, grading 375 grams per ton silver equivalent at Terronera. So Terronera, which will double our production, ultimately is a large high-grade underground mine. It's very similar to what we do at Guanaceví, very similar to what we do at Bolañitos. It will run 1,700 tons per day. Cubo, the mine that we sold, ran between 1,200 and 2,000 tons per day. Bolañitos run as high as 1,800 tons per day. Guanaceví run at close to 1,400 tons per day. So the scale and scope of Terronera is exactly what we've done. It'll do over 12 years, on average, 3.3 million ounces of silver and 33,000 ounces of gold. Again, cost profile is phenomenal. The economics are relatively strong with, I say, $20 silver and $15.75 gold. You've got a NAV value of $175 million. IRR is 21% with a 3.5-year payback. Very robust, as again, our balance sheet's strong. It's got initial capex of $175 million. We are looking to put debt in place to finance the Terronera project. Ultimately, if I can put about $80 to $100 million of debt in place here before year end, I've been working with a number of groups for the last 6 months to be able to do that, at least have a commitment in hand before year end. I think we'll have a formal construction decision in December and take about 2 years to build this project. So again, it's going to double our production, completely change our profile. One of the lowest cost mines in the sector, a 12-year mine life, or we've never had more than a 2.5-year mine life at our other operations, and then a number of exploration opportunities to extend life. Instead of being 12 years, ultimately we expect to be here in Terronera 15, 20, ultimately 25 years. Feasibility study grew from our PFS that we had published in 2020. We had 33% more ounces of silver, 20% more ounces of gold, a mine life that was 2.5 years longer. But we did have a big increase in our initial capex. It went from 100 million in the PFS to $175 million in the FS. That was a function of a number of things. One of the main drivers is operability, flexibility, and adaptability. We put a third portal in, which will give us a lot more flexibility underground. We front end loaded some mine development to give us a lot of flexibility and scope. Things that we'll look at during the build, whether we can extend that out to improve our economics. But ultimately, we know we expect that we can deliver on time, on budget for the Terronera project going forward. Using spot cases from September 9th, when we originally put this presentation together, silver was $24, gold was $1,800, and ultimately it'd come off the highs of $27, $28 earlier this year. But you have a NAV value just shy of $300 million, and IRR is north of 30%, payback period is 2.5 years. All the gold pays for the silver production. You have a negative cash cost on a byproduct basis of negative $1.50 per ounce of silver. Life of mine all-in sustaining cost is $1 per ounce of silver. After tax annual cash flow is about $52 million using the $1,800 price. So very robust. Again, significantly changes the profile of Endeavour. It gives us a platform that a lot of people get quite excited about just because of the scarcity in the silver space of what's out there and what's available. This slide, slide 21, gives you a quick glance of the production profile. We are front end loading gold production, which comes from the La Luz vein, which is on the right hand side of the screen. La Luz, that's a longitudinal section. It's actually, like I say, a gold vein. It's running north of 12 grams silver equivalent per ton. It is open to depth and it's open along strike. So once we develop into it, we can put in some drill pads, drill more efficiently, and see if we can grow La Luz. Ultimately, it's the same thing with Terronera. You can see at the bottom of the deposit or our resource envelope, reserve envelope, some of the highest grade materials near the bottom. Terronera is open along strike and to depth as well. So once we get into Terronera and develop it, put some drill pads in, get some drilling done underneath our resources, see if we can add resources and ultimately add reserves. And that's why we're confident that a 12-year mine life is on the short end. We expect even from Terronera that we can get to 15, 16, 17, 18 years of life. But there is a lot of exploration potential in that district as well. Here we are just from an operating cost standpoint. There we 59 cents under the base case of 1575 gold, puts us in the lowest quartile amongst our silver peer group, all in sustaining costs using same metrics or same underlying prices. $3.24 puts us in the lowest decile of our operating peer group for silver production as a primary metal. Lots of upside work with mine changeover, not necessarily part of mine changeover. One of the other key changes in our management group, Don Gray joined us as Chief Operating Officer in September of 2020. His previous experience was he was in Colombia building the Barraquita mine that got sold to Xinjiang right before COVID. Prior to that, he was in Guatemala building the Escobal mine. So he joined us September 2020. His main mandate is to get Terronera up and running. Over the construction period, he has phenomenal track record. He's got a very good reputation. He's been building out our team over the past year and ultimately looking at a number of ways that we can continue to optimize the mine. So just because the feasibility study is done, now we're taking ownership from Wood, who did that, and making changes to what we think will be better for ourselves when we actually operate it. Or even from an economic standpoint. It's a continuous process, always looking at that stuff. There's a number of things that we continue to try to optimize as we go into the construction period to deliver for our shareholders. The build time on Terronera is going to be roughly 2 years. It's a 20-month build schedule with commissioning expected at the end of it's end of 2023, the second half of 2023, with commercial production coming on in H1 2024. We have started a number of the basic engineering, the procurement, cutting of the hill, so some earthworks. We did approve a $13 million budget from basically August to December from the board as we're looking for financing. And that's to advance our project to make sure we stay on this timeline. So as I say, early work stuff has started. There's a $13 million budget that is approved from now until December 15th. And ultimately, again, expect a formal construction decision when we have debt financing in place by year end. I've worked with 6 different groups, Canadians, Americans, Asians, and Europeans. We're down to 2 to 3 counterparties to put in some sort of project loan financing. Now that the feasibility study is done, a lot of that due diligence is getting done after they've done previously work on the PFS, which allows us to kind of cut down that timeline and have a plan in place that we can announce to the market by year end, and again, come with a formal construction decision from the board. The other aspect of Terronera, and again, touching on the exploration potential, we did put out results in June on a number of veins in the southeast portion of our concessions, San Simon, Fresno, Lindero, Pendencia. You can see some of the grades on these veins, stuff running north of 9 gram gold, 200 grams silver equivalent. It's early days. There's a lot more work to be done there. It just shows that there are these structures in the area that have mineralization that we expect one day can be satellite deposits or significant veins that ultimately will feed into the plant that are only 2 kilometers away from where we currently are building the plant. And then we picked up concessions in 2020, Cerro Gordo and Las Cuetas. Las Cuetas is up north there in the green. We put about a $2 million budget on Cortez for 2021. We announced some drill results back in June, very successful results, and we're continuing to drill Cortez to this date with positive results. So again, that's why we're excited about Terronera and the district, and ultimately expect to be here 20-25 years when it's all said and done. So we do believe we have the right formula now in place. Again, it's going to double our production, cut our cost profile in half. Lowest deciles from an all-in sustaining cost in our space. We have a great management team. Don Gray and his team, he's been bringing guys in again, so we expect that we're going to be able to deliver this on time, on budget over the next 2 years. There's no other, not many other projects that have come to market with regards to this. You can think of Silvercrest that's brought Las Chispas in the last 2 years. Los Gatos has come out publicly as of a public entity, and then ultimately Terronera when it comes to primary silver producing assets. So very excited, lots of excitement around the assets, and ultimately will change Endeavour for the positive going forward for a long time. We're not done with just Terronera. Ultimately, we have the Parral project. It's in behind it. It's in the northern part of Mexico in the state of Chihuahua. Old, prolific silver mining district, number of mines around us, gold mines, silver mines around us. We acquired this in 2016 from SSR, which is something that was too small for their portfolio. Ultimately, for us, we've grown it to about 40 million ounces of silver equivalent. Our goal is to get to 65 million ounces by the end of the year. And then we'll put an economic study on the project to be expected to be done maybe into next year. Primary silver, so 90% of the metal makeup is in silver. This does have base metals, so there is some lead and zinc in it. Old mines have run in the area, produced almost 4 million ounces a year. There's about 4 or 5 different plants in the area, some government run, some privately run. Be a lot easier to get the Parral project into permitting or through permitting compared to Terronera because of the history here. But ultimately, just a pipeline that we can show that we can continue to add ounces through the portfolio we've put together over the last 4 or 5 years. So more work to be done here. As I say, we're trying to grow it to about 65 million ounces before we put an economic study on, because we do need scale based on the grades that we're seeing, which is about 300 grams per ton. And then at Chile, and we put together a portfolio of exploration properties in Chile since 2013. We discarded a number, been through it. We've probably picked up maybe 12 over the years. We have 3 that we're discussing at this point. Paloma, it's a gold asset. Cerro Marcos, copper gold asset, porphyry. And Aida, it's in the Bolivian silver belt. Ultimately, also a silver target, but all these are world-class exploration targets. So Mexico, where underground vein mining, scales of underground veins are generally constrained because of the characteristics of the veins. You're never really greater than 2,000 tons per day. With obviously open pit mines, you can get up to 30,000 tons per day, completely change it. We're excited to drill Aida this year. We're waiting on permits that we should have very shortly here, and have a program. Joel's going to be ready to go here at the end of October and into November. Paloma, we started drilling out early this year. Our thesis was right. There's mineralization there. There's more work to be done. Early results are a little bit lower grade than what we'd hoped, but there are other areas we're going to drill out just to continue to test that. And we've had some majors come look at it and help us with it. And Cerro Marquez, as I say, it's a porphyry copper project, much too big for us. We did a lot of work on it over the years from a geochem standpoint, geophysics, trenching, just to have a hypothesis. We know there's a porphyry there. Ultimately, it's getting people on the ground. Chile's had a tough go with it from a COVID standpoint. Getting people in country has proven to be very difficult. We are trying to get some majors in there and look for a partnership, just because I say the scale is just much too big. But all 3 of these projects are game changer, world-class exploration targets. It's unlikely all 3 would hit, but if one hits, it completely changes the profile again of Endeavour. So very excited about these projects, work to be done. But again, it's just about building our portfolio, making sure that we are a sector leader when it comes to development pipelines, exploration pipelines, And we've been built by the drill bit historically, and we consider that one of our competitive advantages, things that we're good at. So there's a snapshot of what we have currently in our portfolio: operations, development, or exploration. Peral and Bruner, obviously with resources there, more work to be done there, and then world-class discovery potentials of what we have in Chile. Capital structure, currently, as of today, just north of $4 silver, so we're under $700 million in market cap. We have about 170 million shares outstanding, trade on New York Stock Exchange and the Canadian Stock Exchange, Toronto Stock Exchange. Good balance sheet, as I say, $125 million in cash at June 30th. Working capital is $150 million. We have been holding back silver with the downturn in silver prices. I think at the end of Q2, we carried about 500,000 or just under 500,000 ounces of silver. We will carry similar, if not higher amounts here at the end of Q3. We have time. We do expect silver and gold price to increase. Again, this is just a small correction, hopefully, and we expect that to come back. We are a leading sector beta in the sector. One of the highest betas. Silver is a very volatile metal. So there's a lot of movement in Endeavour's share price. Good coverage in Canada and the US, and ultimately always inquisitive to try to grow and improve value. Fresnillo remains one of our largest shareholders. Frisco is one of our significant partners at Guanaceví, and always looking in Mexico for another asset. 2021 catalyst. Biggest catalyst coming now is the advancement of Terronera and having a financing and package in place for the year end, so we can announce a formal construction decision. I think that the market was, or the feasibility study was well received in the market. I think some people had questions about the initial capex and the growth there, but ultimately the economics supported that capex. And then obviously from an operability standpoint, a lot of people are interested, and the banks have been very inquisitive and trying to be partners with us when it comes to debt financing. So positive in that aspect, and continue to do what we've done over the last 15 years. I've been with the company now 14 years, 13 as CFO, now 6 months here as the CEO, and we've had a good entrepreneurial spirit. We have great expertise when it comes to exploration. We want to leverage that and continue to make discoveries, but also grow through some M&A and looking at acquisitions that make sense, accretive sense, to ultimately continue to move our company forward and try to go from that mid-tier space to a larger space. And I think we have the team to be able to do that. So Anthony, that's our presentation. I think I took up about 35-40 minutes. Hopefully we've got questions from the audience, and
Yep,
I'm happy to answer whatever comes our way.
yes, and thank you. Great presentation. Obviously, it's great to see that companies continuing to deliver strong production results, and it's great to see that Terronera is progressing as planned. We do have a few questions in the queue. We'll get to them, but I do want to open the floor up to questions from our attendees. If you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box, and we'll make sure it gets read. For those of you today, the code word is swordfish. So swordfish is the code word. So the first question we have, Brad, and you touched on it briefly, but can you talk a little bit more about the Bruner acquisition in Nevada and how that affects the company's pipeline? And if you guys are going to look at future acquisitions? I know you're going to look at future acquisitions, but can you talk specifically about what attracted you to Bruner and what you think that will mean for the company going forward?
Yeah. Funny enough, it was opportunistic first and foremost. And the day we announced the acquisition of Bruner, I was at actually my son's little league baseball game. They're in the provincials, kind of like a state championship, and I got phone calls after phone calls from basically 7 a.m. until 10:30, and I think he had to be at the park at like 10 a.m. or something like that. One of the websites, mining websites, that carried it as $100 million cash purchase by Endeavour, which is actually a $10 million cash purchase by Endeavour. And obviously I was kind of, a lot of phone calls, congratulations, hey, are you guys moving out of Mexico? Is this say something about Mexico? And you're kind of like, geez, for $10 million bucks, I don't know why I'm getting so many phone calls. It's not, at the time we were about $1 billion market cap, so 1% kind of value compared to what we were. got a phone call 10:30 from our IR saying, hey, this website's carrying this. And then it kind of dawned on me. And it's like, okay, now I know why everyone's calling me. Had to obviously get that redacted, which they actually never really did. They just pulled the article. But for us, it was purely opportunistic. We saw an opportunity, not purely, there's an opportunity at Bruner, there's opportunity in Nevada with some value for some of the lower hanging fruit, smaller potential, but significant in nonetheless that you can run 40 to 50,000 ounces of gold. And Bruner had 300,000 ounces of gold defined, 13 million ounces of silver defined under drilled out basically from 2014 to 2016. The issue is the company that was holding it had done some funky financings. One, debt. Most exploration companies can't get debt on the books because you have no revenues, no cash flow. So the fact that they were able to put $7 million on debt on their books was quite an achievement, but obviously got them in a lot of trouble because they couldn't service that debt. Then they put in some tokens, crypto tokens tied to the gold, and blockchain tokens tied to the gold within the ground, and did a financing that way. And that was fundamentally a disaster for them. We helped clean that up because they approached us, or a group had approached us, and ultimately knew that debt was coming due June 30th. So for the $10 million cash, we paid basically with resources and an equivalent basis about, I think it was just under $20 per ounce of gold in the ground, which was a very fair price. But then the exploration potential that we saw around it, and there'd been a lot of RC drilling in the 80s on it, in the 90s, but no core drilling to be able to actually really prove out the geology and build that structure. We looked at some things. We think we have the ability to grow it, but we have an exploration. We're kind of working on some geophysics and geochem stuff early this year, or late this year, early on in the project life for us, and then come out with a drill program next year to kind of grow it. And as I said earlier, there's a historical PEA on it that valued it at about $90 million with a very low CapEx. So we'll try to grow the project a little bit, but it also is, and it goes to your second part of your question, Anthony. It gives us a footing in Nevada to look at some other projects there, to try to build some economies of scale from an exploration standpoint. We're in the Walker Lane with Bruner. We've looked at other assets there, and we think we can get stuff done, again, just from building scale and getting efficiencies. We're building our team there right now. Expect to have a number of people in place, and excited about a new jurisdiction, excited about the project of Bruner and be able to add value and relatively quick value to it. It wasn't to get out of Mexico. It wasn't to change the direction of the company. You've seen a lot of silver guys pick up gold assets. That's because of the premiums in our NAV multiples. And our goal is to remain a silver producer, a primary silver producer. And if we have to supplement a little bit with some gold cash flow, sure. Precious metals generally have the same following and the beliefs, and we have always followed gold first and foremost, and silver basically lags gold, overshoots it, and there's a lot more literature out there on gold than silver, and that's a little bit changing with what's happening in the silver space. But so long story short, we are looking more in Nevada, but not changing the profile of the company, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the last time you were on, someone had asked a question about acquisitions, and I think that was at a time when silver was closer to do $28 an ounce. And you said there's the inventory was pretty tight. Have you seen that loosen up a little bit, more opportunities coming to the market?
No, haven't seen more opportunities yet coming to the market. Down the pipelines, there's opportunities, more exploration, more development stuff, not from a producing standpoint of things coming onto market. And I mean, these are the times that you can actually make money for shareholders, is when you see pullbacks in prices. And this is, I always say to people, well, this is when we actually make our money, are these opportunities. And it's just the jurisdictions that have a lot of silver are difficult. The Bolivia's, Argentina's got great geology from a silver standpoint, but they're tough jurisdictions. We've seen in Peru, we've seen in Chile, government regimes moving more left, making it more difficult for mining companies to permit operations and ultimately look for profits. And even Mexico slid a little bit that way with AMLO. Hasn't changed any of the laws for Mexico, but you're hearing a lot more rhetoric there. And Nevada has obviously forever been a great jurisdiction and continues to be. It is the silver state. But there's more gold projects that we're seeing in Nevada than actually silver. And there'll be some that come out over time. It's just going through the process and looking at it and remaining inquisitive. We have a VP of Corp Dev that has a radar screen that's continually added to, and things pop up or things that we had never heard of or seen before. Might be smaller in scale, but we look to see if we can kind of grow it and add it in. And I'm confident that we'll be able to add something and continue to build out that pipeline. It's just where it is it an operation, is it development, or as an exploration asset?
Right.
Those always yet to be determined.
Okay. I think you answered this question. What is the total silver holdings on the books? You said that at the end of this quarter, it's going to be close to 600,000 ounces. Is that what you said?
Yeah, well, at the end of June 30th, we were at 450 to 500,000 ounces of silver. I think we're going to be north of 600. We've kind of added about 200 or held back sales is really, so maybe we're 600, 700. I haven't looked at the numbers. Today's the 29th. Tomorrow we close the quarter. We'll have that out basically, I think, on the 8th. But we are holding back some silver at this point. There's no need to sell into a falling market at this point. And when we need the cash, we'll sell it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you see any silver mines coming online in the next 12 to 24 months that could substantially impact the demand supply balance?
Well, annually, I think right now there's about 800 million ounces coming to market through mining, primary silver mines, as a byproduct through the copper mines, lead zinc mines, gold mines, and then recyclables. Chispas, which is Silvercrest, it's going to do about 7 million ounces. Los Gatos 7 million ounces, which is basically already online. Chispas would be the one coming online. It's the real question comes down to the copper industry and how much is coming online through as a byproduct. But we haven't heard, there's not a significant, it's obviously becoming more and more difficult to get mines permitted into production. We saw a lot of dollars leave the space from an exploration standpoint, so we don't have a lot of projects currently being developed across all metals, which is going to impact how much silver comes to the market. I think we peaked about a billion ounces of supply. It's got contracted back into the 800s. And I suspect we'll hover around the 800s here for the next 4 to 5 years, if not a little bit lower, before we start seeing some of these projects in the last 3 or 4 years make inroads to becoming a development project. So nothing that's going to reshape the silver supply standpoint in my eyes.
Yeah. So I think this is a question that's important. Do the cartels present any kind of problem with mining and transportation? So, I mean, obviously you're in some pretty populated jurisdictions, you're not seeing any kind of issues in that regard.
No, you're right. We're in jurisdictions where we haven't had issues, or provinces or states that we haven't had issues. It's a question I've gotten for 15 years, and ultimately for us, the cartels haven't impacted us at all. You hear things obviously on a broader scale and how I guess that world's completely changed with legalization of marijuana and drug trafficking organizations have moved, I guess, to heavier drugs and more chemicals and all that jazz. And then ultimately those revenue streams that get tight and they venture into other entrepreneurial activities, I guess. But for us, it hasn't. But we always take the precautionaries from transportation and effectively transporting our concentrate. We have so many measures in place to make sure that beyond insurance that we've got proper security on that. And there are parts of Mexico, I think mostly the state of Guerrero, we hear a lot of stuff in the news. CNN or Fox covers things about what's happening in Mexico. It's definitely on that far end of the scale where I think most people in Mexico, even their jaws drop. And, for us, it's business as usual, mindful of what's out there, work with various groups to understand what's going on, but does not affect our business day to day at all.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we have a question. Companies leverage to silver, wondering if we have prices staying down, we'll have to wait, investors will have to wait for upside, but the company put a dividend on the stock to slow stock price decline in this environment. Are you even considering a dividend at this point?
Yeah, no, we need our cash right now. And like I say, we're putting debt on the books. We need our cash right now because we want to build the Terronera project and have all that in place. And where we are in our cycle as a company is we're still looking to grow, and there are going to be opportunities out there to grow even after Terronera. Like I say, we had Parel and growing Parel to about 65 million ounces, putting an economic study on that, and then hopefully there's a build program there. And we think and ultimately it'd be great to have a dividend one day. We're not there yet as a company. It's going to take time. Ultimately, probably 2 or 3 more projects that are self-sustaining and have a long mine life. With silver getting and cash flows, our margins are obviously contracting with silver prices dropping, would make it even more difficult to provide a dividend at this point. But I can say that I think our capital allocation and where we're putting the money to work, having a mine like Terronera that's got a cost profile that's 59 cents per ounce of silver when it's operating, all in sustaining costs of $3. It will allow us to do a dividend down the road and operate in any price environment, so to speak.
Yeah, obviously, if silver even stays at these prices and you get Terronera on line, it's with the reduction of the all-in sustaining costs, it's going to still be huge margins there. Yes. What are you going to do with the property in El Compass? What's the goal with that eventually?
Yeah, it's interesting question. Ultimately, we sold Kubo for about $20 million. For us, Compass is 250 tons per day. It's got capacity to go up to 500 tons per day. It was bumping along here this year, a little bit of free cash flow in Q1. Q2, it flipped to negative free cash flow. We haven't had the exploration success necessarily where we are mining, which we had at the other operations. And we have had some exploration success on other concessions in that area near it, but we'd have to refurbish the plant. So we have drilled that out for this year, and our budget's been spent this year. And we're looking at, do we refurbish the plant? But there are other Canadian companies in the area that have resources, would be potentially interested in the plant, 3 or 4 groups. We also have concessions that we actually cut deals on. A copper mine's right beside us. We are earning money there still from royalties. Ultimately, I think this year we'll earn about $400,000 or $500,000 of royalties, and that's going to grow over the next 5-10 years with the growth of the Cozamin mine. So we're going to get our money out. Wasn't a huge investment. We bought the company or that mine for $6 million, invested about $19 million, or $25 million in, made roughly $12 million. So we aren't in the black yet on it. But if we can offload that or continue to figure out ways to build a resource around it and refurbish the plant, maybe it works. But I think that royalty that we've got in place with it will ultimately get us back into the black in itself. But we'll see. There's going to be work to be done there for the next 6 months and try to put in the right person's hands.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, it's a very, very small part of your production anyway. So
yeah.
With everything has been delayed, with supply chain issues and things like that. Are you seeing any major issues getting equipment or other resources to the properties, to the mines that you need?
We've done a really good job of that in 2020, looking at that. And every year there's something different that kind of pops up here with what's happening globally, and borders basically closed. The good news for Terronera and kind of that $9 million budget that we'd put in for the first half of the year is we ordered a lot of long lead items, equipment, ordering more long lead items here in Q3 at the end. And we actually did some in August to make sure things are on site for Terronera, which is our biggest risk at this point. We have a ball mill already in a warehouse. We're looking for a used SAG mill that it maybe needs refurbishment. So we've done actually a really good job. Our operations team, I got to hand it to them about sourcing that. We are seeing, like I say, every month there seems to be something that's impacted. We're either sourcing it, got to source it locally where we used to get out of the United States. And now we find it in Mexico, and costs are either a little bit more, or we just have to be ahead of it from a max min standpoint and order earlier than what we had in the past. So it's the amount of things that it's touched on is significant, but like I say, our operations team did a great job kind of identifying that early on. So hasn't impacted us as much as I've heard from other people, steel being a big part of it and cost of steel increasing.
Yeah. Seems to be an issue that you guys are handling well. I think we're gonna have one more question, and I don't know how much you can go into it, Dan, but can you talk about, I know you're talking to investment banks about, some debt financing. Can you talk in terms of like the terms of that financing? Is it favorable? I mean, how are you looking at it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, for me, cost of capital is important, because our balance sheet's in such a good shape. I think it's important that we take on some debt and leverage our balance sheet for our shareholders. Everybody learns in finance. I'm an accountant by background, but some debt is good. Too much debt's not good. It creates some financial constraints, and we're looking at the project level debt, so fully secure, and that ultimately puts you at kind of a 5% range, just for kind of ballparkish, and I won't get specific terms, but we've talked to all in the mining space. There's a lot of alternative lenders that got capital in the double digit range, even high teens, mid teens. Asian groups, we're going to expect to be kind of like that 4 to 6% range if we can get this executed on project loan financing. Maybe we have to put in a little bit of gold hedge just to protect the bank, especially with what we're seeing there. But that stuff we're all going to work through over time. And if we ever had to hedge, it would be on a byproduct basis with as little amount, and try to have none. Early indications from all the groups was none.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that is, and just we've looked at everything. We looked at convertible debentures, we looked at corporate loan levels, revolvers, project loan financing. I think that's our job as a management team, is look at everything, look at the best cost of capital and flexibility with that, and make sure that we don't hamstring ourselves if we want to do other aspects. And but ultimately, if we can put in project financing in that 4 to 6% range, your normal upfront fees, arrangement fees, commitment fees, I think we'd be in really good shape.
Yeah, great. I think we're going to leave it there. Appreciate you coming on today and giving us an update on the company. It looks like a lot of great things are happening. Terronera is going to be the big one, obviously, and it's nice to see that that's progressing as planned. And I think down here with silver, like you said, we're at the end of the quarter with the silver sell-off. It's probably a really good time to take a look at the stock and do a little bottom fishing down here. Before we wrap it up, Dan, do you have any parting words to that point?
No, yeah, I think the big takeaway, Anthony, for us is Terronera and the milestones with Terronera, and putting financing in place and getting that formal construction decision, because it completely changes Endeavour as a platform. As I say, our cost profile just gets cut in half, doubles our production, and puts us on kind of that next pedestal to continue out and grow. So if you believe in silver long term, I think we're a great vehicle to be able to play that. And these pullbacks are the times that people should make that investment. It's a little harder than always, easier said than done sometimes when it comes to that. I mean, even my own portfolio here, it's when everything's kind of pulling back, you get nervous, but like I say, that's when you can actually make money.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Okay, so we're going to leave it there. If anyone has any questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to email me. You can always go to the company's website at edrsilver.com to get in details on the company's current projects, as well as technical reports and press releases. I do encourage everyone to visit the website. There are some short informational videos about silver and its role in the economy that are really great. And I want to thank all of our attendees for taking the time today to get up to speed on Endeavour Silver. I encourage you all to take a look at the company and look where silver is. And I think we're going to see a bounce here soon. But we're going to leave it there. Thanks again to everyone. And Dan, we'll do it again next week. Until then, everybody be safe and be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.